And tonight on the Daily Wrap, the president gets his nuclear deal with Iran done, but will Republicans block it? Donald Trump speaks out on the nuclear deal as he continues rising in the polls. And disturbing news coming out of the VA about veterans waiting for medical care. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Contra, joined by my co-host, Rick Ungar.
Quite a day.
Yes, a big day.
I feel like I haven't stopped since 6 o'clock this morning.
You've been immersed in Iran and Tehran and everything nuclear, huh?
Amazing day.
Victory for the president?
That's a long conversation that I suspect we'll be having over the next hour.
At least the next half hour.
Yeah.
By the way, folks, normally you'd see Steve Malzberg at this time, but don't worry, you can catch him right after this show at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, to Mr. Ungar's right, he is a Forbes.com columnist and an Emmy winner. Daytime soap Emmy winner, from what I understand. Good for you.
The young
Days of our news.
Days of our news. Well done. He is Bill Tucker. And finally, he's the editor of thewisdomdaily.com, and you're not. That is Brad Hirschfield. Welcome back.
Always good to be here.
We'll be needing your Israeli connection expertise thingy tonight, so we appreciate that.
We'll do that. We'll hook you up.
Okay, good. Let's get right to the Daily Download.
Because America negotiated from a position of strength and principle, we have stopped the spread of nuclear weapons in this region. Because of this deal, the international community will be able to verify that the Islamic Republic of Iran will not develop a nuclear weapon.
And so a deal is done with Iran, and as you heard, the president says it will prevent the country from developing nuclear weapons. But not everyone is buying it, starting most notably with Republican Senator Tom Cotton.
This proposed deal is a terrible, dangerous mistake that's going to pave the path for Iran to get a nuclear weapon, while also giving them tens of billions of dollars of sanctions relief, even lifting the arms embargo at a time when they're destabilizing the entire Middle East. The American people are going to repudiate this deal, and I believe Congress will kill the deal.
Rick Ungar, is the senator correct in that assessment?
Well, he may or may not be correct that Congress will kill the deal. I kind of doubt it. They would have to get past a veto, which I think is unlikely. I do have to say, though, I really wish the president, in making his announcement this morning, wouldn't have said, you know, I'm interested in a robust debate. I want to hear what Congress thinks. But by the way, if they don't agree with me, I'm going to veto it. It's highly unlikely that the Senate can override that veto. In terms of whether or not the people are going to reject it, it's a fascinating question, because if you look at polls as recently as 2 days ago, the American public does appear to support a deal with Iran. Now, what makes that kind of tricky is that in the same polls, they're saying they don't trust Iran at all. 7 out of 10 people don't trust Iran, but yet they want this deal with Iran.
So, Bill, maybe the way to read into that poll is that America is war-weary.
Exactly.
We're sick of hearing about the Middle East. So, you know what? If this gets one more war out of the way, then great, and we really don't care how it gets done.
I think that's exactly right. I think they're looking, what is our option? We're going to do a war? We're not going to do that. We'll go with the deal.
Okay, quickly.
Well, I think the real issue is we are war-weary, but that then contradicts the president. We didn't negotiate from strength, and not negotiating from strength is a very bad place to negotiate.
Okay, well, let's bring in Daniel Pipes. He is the president of the Middle East Forum. Daniel, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Was the president just set on getting a deal done no matter what the cost?
Precisely. I think it's arguable that Barack Obama, insofar as he has foreign policy ambitions, set them on Iran. Not China, not Russia, not Mexico, not the other countries of the world, but Iran. Bringing Iran in from the cold, having normal relations with Iran, that has been his goal through the 6.5 years. Not a bad goal in itself. The trouble is the execution, which has been execrable.
Daniel, it's Rick Ungar. You know, the question that I always have, I certainly see the arguments that you would make and others who agree with your point of view would make that would be against this agreement. But the question I have to ask, during all this time that we've been negotiating it, why hasn't anybody who opposes it been able to come up with some viable, not solutions, but alternatives that the American people could look at and say, maybe we should be going that way?
Well, you have in Iran an incredibly hostile state to us. I mean, they scream out death to America just a couple of days ago with the president of the country.
Daniel, that doesn't answer my question of where are the alternatives.
There is no solution. It's really simple. When you have a country that wants aggression against you, is hostile to you, there is no deal. There's no alternative. There's no.
How do you
deal.
stop a nuclear weapon from being made then?
Well, you stop it the obvious way, by bombing it to smithereens.
Then that's another option.
Well, of course, it's the only option. It's the only option. I mean, let's not play around. When you have a government like the Iranian one that seeks to destroy us and plausibly can. Have you heard about electromagnetic pulse? Have you heard about 90% of Americans dying within 1 year? This is serious business. And you have a government that simply thinks it can reach a deal with the Iranian Islamic Republic. It's just madness.
Mr. Pipes, it's Brad Hirschfield. I want to ask you about what you were just speaking about. I think it's related. It seems to me that the center pin of the president and the administration's argument was essentially to tell us that the only alternative is war, and therefore we can't accept war, right? Real sensitivity to the danger of the ends justifying the means. My concern is that while they were right to caution us about ends justifying means, they've fallen into an equally dangerous trap where the means justify the ends. That is to say, they've done the process the way they envisioned it, and as a result have convinced themselves that the product, that the ends, must therefore be good. It strikes me as a very dangerous place to be. What do you say?
I would say that a century ago, before the rise of ideologies, it would have been reasonable to have this kind of accommodation, appeasement, and think it might work. But we've lived through Hitler, we've lived through Stalin, we've lived through so many other dictators. We know by now that when you have ideological dictators, such as Khamenei in Iran, this kind of appeasement doesn't work. And yet, Barack Obama and so many others believe it will. Well, we will soon find out, won't we?
Mr. Pipes, it's Bill Tucker in New York. The practical reality is, as we were just discussing before we came to you, is the deal we got's the deal we got. And the president clearly intends to sign it. He even told them, have a robust debate, then when you don't agree with me, I'm going to veto your veto. And it really is unlikely that we're going to get any other kind of deal. This is it. So what do we do now?
The best we can do now is to exploit the opportunities to reach into Iran. If one looks back to the Soviet Union, clearly all of these connections to Soviet society, financial and cultural and touristic and person to person, did have an impact in that it led to a weakening of Soviet will. So the best we can hope for here is that something similar takes place before the Iranian leadership decides to deploy, or at least to threaten to deploy.
Daniel, speaking of the Soviet Union, when President Reagan negotiated a deal with the Soviets to clamp down on nuclear proliferation, there were the same criticisms we hear today about this deal. Was the President Reagan, that is, was he appeasing the Soviets at that time?
If I recall correctly, in the 1980s, we had a massive military buildup at the time that the Soviet Union was fracturing. The will to continue had collapsed. In this situation, it's precisely the opposite. We are cutting back everywhere militarily, and the Iranians are building, and they're going to build even more once they get their $150 billion signing bonus. So it's not like the Soviet Union in the 1980s. It's more like the Nazi Germans in the 1930s, and appeasing them didn't work.
Daniel, final question. We only have about 30 seconds. That $150 billion, do you think that could be used towards the Hezbollahs, towards the terrorist organizations around Israel and around the world?
It'll be used for nuclear program, for ballistic rocket program, for conventional program, and of course for the terrorist groups. Yes, the whole bunch of them. $150 billion even today goes quite a long way.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Pipes, thank you so much. He is the president of the Middle East Forum. Appreciate you coming on tonight.
Thanks for the invitation.
Okay, so quickly around the table. Are you surprised a deal got done, Brad Hirschfield?
I'm not surprised the deal got done for exactly the reason I said. I think this administration convinced itself they did the process right. By definition, the product was right, too, and I think that's just not true.
Bill?
I totally agree with Brad. I have nothing to add to that analysis.
Well, in recent days, I thought that the chances of it getting done had gone down below 50%. So I can't say I'm surprised, but I thought it could go a different way. I still think we have a long way to go to see how this ends up.
Maybe too big to fail. Maybe too many countries were involved for it to shut down. Anyway, what do you think of the president's job as a foreign policy negotiator? Go to newsmaxtv.com/comments and let us know. Back with more after the break. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, joined by my co-host, Rick Ungar. And filling out the panel tonight, Bill Tucker and Brad Hirschfield. One person not happy with the Iran deal is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Our concern, of course, is that the militant Islamic State of Iran is going to receive a sure path to nuclear weapons. Many of the restrictions that were supposed to prevent it from getting there will be lifted. And in addition, Iran will get a jackpot, a cash bonanza of hundreds of billions of dollars, which will enable it to continue to pursue its aggression and terror in the region and in the world. This is a bad mistake of historic proportions.
Obviously, Bibi is concerned with Israel's national security, but Secretary of State John Kerry thinks Israel is actually better off.
Israel is safer.
Historic mistake, he said.
Well, he said the same thing about the interim agreement, and he was wrong. The fact is that he's practically been making comments that are way over the top. He doesn't even know what the concessions are that we have not engaged in, because we haven't made concessions. So there's a game here, there's a process here. This is under attack by people who really don't know the terms of the agreement.
No, that wasn't defensive or anything. Joining us now from Jerusalem, Avishai Ben Sasson Gordis. He's a policy analyst for Malad. That's the Center for the Renewal of Israeli Democracy. Avishai, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.
Netanyahu says it's a bad deal. Do you agree?
Well, I don't agree, regrettably. I think that this deal is the best of the alternatives facing Israel right now to prevent nuclear Iran, which is basically, the top priority for all of us. So if this is the best option on the table, then no, this is not a bad deal.
Avishai, Rick Ungar. I'm curious your reaction to the Prime Minister's comments that we'll be giving them a jackpot, literally hundreds of billions of money that we've had frozen that they'll get their hands on. Are you less convinced than the Prime Minister is that they will use that for purposes we'd all rather they didn't?
They will use some of it for purposes that probably we'd prefer them not to use it. But let's focus on the main issue. Why did we freeze this money? Why did you freeze this money to begin with? The issue wasn't the fact that Iran was sponsoring terror. They were doing that since 1979. No one, even in this agreement, thinks that they've changed. That's why actions having to do with their support of terror will stay in place. The main issue is, and the reason we've frozen all this money and we've gone to all this effort to put the sanctions in place, was to stop their nuclear threat, which was, let's face it, the main threat Iran was posing to world and to Israeli security specifically. If we're talking about non-conventional threats to Israel, the Iranian nuclear program is the only current non-conventional threat to Israel. And having this agreement in place takes it off the table. Now, it's true that some of this money, and let's be clear about this, this is only some of this money, because a lot of this money has to go back home to sponsor all those people in Tehran and other places in Iran who are looking forward to this agreement to break off the sanctions and give them some economic relief. That's what brought them to the table. So what we've got here is an agreement that takes care of the biggest threat Israel was seeing around it, and to a certain degree, not too great a degree, adds marginally to other conventional threats, which we are, and I'm saying this as an officer in my background myself, as a military officer, we are perfectly capable of dealing with. So yes, we've got a good deal on our hands that takes care of the biggest problem, and it has less than desirable outcomes in some aspects of it, but the main issue is that it takes care of what should be taken care of, and that's
Avishai, it's Brad Hirschfield. I want to make sure we get you in on a number of different questions here. So I want to ask, because repeatedly in your own position paper you indicate that this is the best available option, that we have no other choice. And my concern, and I ask you this given that I know you come at this from a position as proud and pro-Israel as those who deeply disagree with you. But when is it ever wise to make a decision based on the sense of having no other options? It seems to me, in fact, that the history of Israel in 60-plus years is to have never played into that canard when it was offered, and to insist that when reality was not what it needed to be, It changed reality to make it peaceful and more humane, the exact opposite of what buying into this deal does.
Now, I'm not sure I actually, I'm not sure I actually see specific examples in which I see. Let's take it from a different angle, maybe. It's the end of a long day here in Israel.
I know it's after midnight. We're glad you're with us.
Yeah. So let's try and come at it from a different direction. I think this is actually coming at a problem that had no better solution from a different angle. Looking back to 2009, Iran had their first stockpile for the first bomb. Okay? And we were looking at different options. Now, one option which is not on the table, let's be clear about this, I would be glad if it was, but it's not a realistic option, is making it so that Iran never had a nuclear program. That's not an option. Now, if that would have been an option, it would have been the best option. The real options on the table are either going to war with Iran and getting some sort of rollback to 2 to 4 years, depends on whether it's an Israeli strike or an American strike, and then you have to go at it again. Israel can't do it, you can do it. So actually bringing Iran to the table and bringing them to a point where they're making concessions about their program, which they were willing to make in the past, I see it as an achievement, and most people I talk to from the security establishment see it the same way.
Hey, we appreciate you joining us again, sir. We're totally out of time, and again, after midnight there. So once again, thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, this is a Daily Wrap. More after the break.
You know, at the outset of the Iran negotiations, the Obama administration said that a good deal would affirm that Iran does not have the right to enrich. They also said that keeping sanctions in place until Iran met concrete, verifiable standards. And they believed that they had to stop Iran's drive for a nuclear bomb. Listen, the president has abandoned all of those goals, and that's why the deal that we have out there, in my view, from what I know of it thus far, is unacceptable.
And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. That was Speaker of the House John Boehner today, pointing out that the president abandoned his own terms when laying out the deal with Iran. Here's more from the Speaker.
And this isn't about Democrats or Republicans. It's not a partisan issue at all. It's about right versus wrong. And we're going to do everything we can to get to the details. And if, in fact, it's as bad a deal as I think it is at this moment, we'll do everything we can to stop it.
Now, the president, on the other hand, says he will stop any effort out of Congress to kill the deal.
I am confident that this deal will meet the national security interests of the United States and our allies. So I will veto any legislation that prevents the successful implementation of this deal.
So the line has been drawn in the sand again. Let's bring in Congressman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. Thanks for joining us, Congressman. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
So both the White House and Iranian officials have claimed they have a great deal. Is this a good deal with Iran? I have a feeling you're going to say no.
No, it's not a good deal. Lack of transparency is a problem. The fact that you still have Iran with over 5,000 centrifuges. You've got some delays in there, the amount of enrichment they can do for an 8-year period of time. The arms embargo only lasts 5 years. All of those are problematic. And then one of the worst is they don't have anytime, anywhere inspections. Iran will get a 2-week notice before they come in and inspect a facility. So that gives them 2 weeks to hide whatever it is they want to hide. And I think this is a really bad deal for us. It's a bad, bad deal.
Let me ask you a question. Does the president need Congress's approval to release the billions of Iranian frozen funds, or can he just do that by executive order?
He is going to need permission to do that. I know he wants to lift these sanctions, but you know, they have tried to bend and give and help Iran just as much as they can. It makes you wonder who's really driving these negotiations and who it is there to benefit, because you see benefit for Iran, you're not seeing benefit for the American people.
Congressman, it's Rick Ungar. You know, I take your point when you express your concern over the 2-week notice provision. I'd even agree with you, it's longer than I think it should be. However, can't we agree that the reality of the situation is such that to actually produce anything that they'd want to go hide once they get our 2-week notice, there would be a trail of distribution of materials coming into that country that we would be able to find not only through some of the mechanisms that are built into the deal, but basically by satellite or other means that we've long had to see when that's taking place. Are we not possibly overstating that concern?
I don't think we are overstating that concern. And I think that you have to look at the history that we have had with Iran. You have to look at their current actions. You have to...
Yep. Did we just lose?
I think we just lost her.
I think we lost the Congress.
I think we did.
Okay.
Okay.
And we just okay. We lost the congressman, unfortunately.
That's what happens when you disagree with me.
Does happen. You pay the price.
You don't disagree with me and expect not to be disconnected. I'm just saying.
It sounded like she was on dial-up, by the way. I was expecting you got mail for a moment, but we appreciate Congressman Blackburn. We appreciate you Ken coming on. So, guys, let's discuss this for a little bit.
One question we couldn't get to, unfortunately, because we lost her, is does this create an arms race? And that's something we've been talking about here in the Middle East, nuclear or otherwise.
Specifically Saudi Arabia.
Specifically Saudi Arabia.
See, my question about that, and it's absolutely fair to bring it up, and it's one of the things that does concern me in this deal, but I have to ask the question. I mean, the Saudis are not stupid. They've had the same concerns about a nuclear-armed Iran that we've had for a very long time. I don't quite get what triggers, this event triggers their desire, now we have to go build our own, when they wouldn't have wanted to do that going back ages. And don't you think they're probably already doing it anyhow?
So let me answer very quickly. Erosion of trust. When America doesn't stand strong, the Saudis will default, and this will become an arms race because there will need to be in their minds a Sunni Arab bomb to compete with the Iranian Shia bomb. When the United States stands as a bulwark against that, then they can live with it. This welcomes Iran back into the community of nations in a way that is not only going to scare, but is going to motivate much of the Arab world.
I completely buy your point that the Sunni side will feel the need to have the same thing. What I don't buy is that this triggers that and that they wouldn't have figured that out before, knowing that we had this problem for some time with Iran.
Either way, Marie Harp deserves at least 90% of the credit for getting this deal done. I think that we could all agree with. Yes. Anyway, the Saudis said this new deal with Iran will make the Middle East more dangerous. Go to newsmaxtv.com/comments and let us know. Back with more after the break.
Attention homeowners. Quicken Loans has some very important information regarding the U.S. government's Home Affordable Refinance Program, or HARP. We've told you about HARP in the past, and we're happy to...
And welcome back to Daily Wrap. Well, billionaire real estate mogul Donald Trump continues to rise in the polls, this time with the Tea Party, according to a new Monmouth University poll. Monmouth University, of course, the home of the Tea Party. The national poll of Republican voters finds Mr. Trump in a close second place behind Republican frontrunner Jeb Bush, with Ted Cruz in third, rounding out the rest of the field. We will see. Walker, Huckabee Rubio, Carson, Paul, Perry, Christie, and that's only half of it. So, there are more as well. Carly Fiorina, John Kasich, unfortunately coming in at 2%, or fortunately, depending on your point of view. Lindsey Graham somehow at -1%. Am I reading that correctly? No, just below. That means the arrow. And Jim Gilmore now at 0%.
I think we should have a contest. You can win a cruise if you can tell us who Jim Gilmore is.
Right, well, or 0.0, as some would put it.
0.0.
And that wasn't quite Gilmore's reaction, but
it was close.
Imagine that. How am I polling? You're at 0.0.
Is anybody else but me shocked that this was a Tea Party poll and that Jeb Bush is leading it?
Yeah, and Ted Cruz was third.
What's that about?
Why does that shock you?
Jeb Bush isn't identified as a
Tea Party folks that I know absolutely detest Jeb Bush.
Well, but this isn't about whether they detest him or not. They're asking people who they would vote for.
Yeah.
Well, what you
and
might
they're
be
picking
seeing,
Jeb Bush over these other candidates.
What we actually might be seeing is an important turn, right? An actual willingness to choose victory over ideological purity.
Maybe.
That's how you win
among
races.
15% of them. But that was the part of that poll that absolutely stunned me.
Well, the poll also points out that since entering the race back in June, Trump's favorability rating among Tea Partiers has gone from 20 to 55%, 35-point jump. And despite the controversy, bad press, and severed ties, business ties, stemming from his comments on illegal immigrants, his negative rating has only gone up 1 point to 41%. So it seems as though his immigration message has been resonating with some folks. Brad, how does Trump do it?
Look, I'm going to sound like just beating on this drum every night because people are hungry for authenticity. And they will take an authentic circus act over an inelegant, unsophisticated, or what they see as inauthentic politics. But let's be clear, the voting public is smart. The poll also showed that 39% believe that Donald's in the race for personal publicity, not to become president. Well, so at some level, they like the show. No one's electing him president.
74% of people know that.
But is there anybody who doesn't believe that 55% bump in the Tea Party poll is precisely what's translating to his lead now in the general polls?
Yeah.
That is who is supporting Donald Trump.
But immigration is a hot button issue, and I can tell you this from years of reporting on it. There is a lot of anger out there. There's a lot of anger among people who are frustrated, angry. No, they're not racist. They're just frustrated because they feel like the illegal immigrant is somehow getting the upper hand over them. So to that degree, Brad, I disagree with you. It's not a circus act. It is authentic. And there is a real anger out there that's not fake.
And to your point, even the black community thinks that illegal immigrants are getting a fairer shake than those in Chicago or those in other urban areas that are they feel are being ignored.
But don't you have to ask the question, wasn't that anger there when it was Ted Cruz out beating the immigration drum? Why all of a sudden has it translated so well for Donald Trump? I'm going to answer my own question.
Go ahead.
Because when you say things in a rude, obnoxious, loud fashion, there are people out there who translate that into honest. The ruder you are, the more honest you are, because your mom told you weren't supposed to talk that way. So you must mean it.
Well, I'm not sure it's their fault. We've talked about trust is plummeting in public institutions, and that includes politicians. You want to beat the Donald, build back trust in general, whether it's for Ted Cruz or Jeb Bush or anyone else.
Bill talked about it before. Let's touch upon it now. Suffolk University poll finds out today that Trump is actually leading among Republicans and independents for the GOP nomination and that's a nice logo, by the way, that we got there. 17% he's leading with, but losing to Hillary Clinton in a head-to-head matchup. So here's what Donald Trump told CNN's Dana Bash earlier today about this morning's announcement of the Iranian nuclear deal.
The Iranians are very good negotiators. The Persians are always great negotiators. They are laughing at us back in Iran. And why didn't we get our prisoners back? Why doesn't somebody say, where are our prisoners? Nobody's even talking about it. We have 4 people that are in prison that shouldn't be. Why couldn't they make that part of the deal?
And he has a point, Brad. We talked about this before. First, I love that the Persians are great negotiators.
Persians are always great
negotiators.
You ever go to a BMW dealership? That's right. But anyway.
No, I haven't, but maybe
every
different
culture
discussion.
on the planet, apparently, is a great negotiating culture, except ours.
Well, he's got a broad stroke for everyone. It's one set of categories for Mexicans. It's another category for
But they're all
Persians.
brilliant negotiators.
But as Bill said, he does tap into that partial truth about these cultures that allow them to push.
Right. Well, we will be airing a special presentation of Donald Trump's immigration speech he delivered in Phoenix over the weekend. That's at 10 p.m. and midnight tonight, so be sure to tune into that. And we want to know, would you vote for Donald Trump and why? Spell it out in an email. Go to newsmaxpolls.com to cast your vote. newsmaxpolls.com. We'll be back with more in just a moment. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. Well, before we jump in, let's jump on board, shall we? Yes. Newsmax wants to send one lucky couple on a 7-day Silver Sea cruise to the Caribbean this winter. Obviously, a luxury cruise in the Silver Wind is the trip of a lifetime. To win, however, you have to enter our sweepstakes. Visit newsmax.com/sweepstakes. That's newsmax.com/sweepstakes to enter. Okay, it's potluck time, part of the show. Go around the table, share our favorite stories of the day. Hirschfield, what are you serving up?
I'm serving up Nathan Hale, patriot, founding father. Turns out he may have only had one life to give for his country, but there's a lot of him to go around at Yale University. And this is the real deal. And it's angered author Eric Metaxas. He's the author of a really interesting biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the anti-Nazi Lutheran pastor who was murdered toward the end of the war in 1945. Metaxas saw that they were giving away, through the Yale Alum magazine, the class of 75 is giving away Bonhoeffer bobbleheads. I'm sorry, not Bonhoeffer bobbleheads. That would have really upset him. Yeah. But giving away Nathan Hale bobbleheads. Now, it's an image we have right there of a little statuette of a statue that's actually on campus in New Haven with the words, "I regret that I have but one life to give for my country." And he saw this as, he was staggered and profoundly grieved, he said, Metaxas, because he felt this was mocking a holy event. Now, I don't know why he thinks it's mocking. I've been given bobbleheads of all kinds of people, including of Martin Luther at one of the country's leading Lutheran seminaries, and that's the pastor that he wrote about. So I think the mocking piece is a little wrong. It is a sacred event, but he went on to make comparisons that are truly dangerous. He said, what if they made a bobblehead of Martin Luther King Jr., Matthew Shepard, the Prophet Muhammad, or Trayvon Martin? Now that's a weird set of comparisons, and this is where sensitivity becomes really dangerous political correctness. Martin Luther King Jr., you're going to compare the two situations? Matthew Shepard, who was murdered because he was gay, the Prophet Muhammad, who died peacefully in his sleep of a fever, and Trayvon Martin, who at best died under circumstances that were bad but not criminal because no charges were brought. So there is something really weird about the absolute absence of a sense of humor, but even worse, imagining that all of these are the same. That they're not all the same. And this is what happens when legitimate sensitivity gets collapsed and no distinctions can be made whatsoever, and no one is allowed to have a sense of humor about anything, as opposed to saying, you know, we went to campus, and that campus had a statue that celebrated a great American named Nathan Hale. And if you want to be in touch with the spirit of the patriotism that Nathan Hale represents, support the class, support the university, and get the bobblehead, and move on. But then on top of that, to imagine that a bobblehead of Nathan Hale, a bobblehead of Trayvon Martin, that that's the same thing? Look, with respect to Mr. Metaxas, it was a good book, and I get it. The death of a patriot is a kind of holy moment. But those analogies have no place in meaningful discourse.
Amen to that. Rick Ungar?
Well, you know, for years, it seems like the ultimate crack against Obama or the left has been whatever philosophy, whatever they do, whatever political strategy is, quote, ripped from the playbook of Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky has become shorthand for ultra left wing. But it's always made me wonder, why is that reserved for the left? Why can't the right also follow the principles of Saul Alinsky? It turns out he was once asked the question and he said they can, which is why the left needs to be better at it than the right. Well, that got me thinking and examining the candidates that we have running for president right now. And it occurred to me very clearly that some of our GOP candidates have now ripped from the playbook of Saul Alinsky certain strategies. To illustrate the point, in my article for Forbes.com yesterday, I actually took some of the rules for revolution that Saul Alinsky outlined in his own books, and I applied them to what's happening right now with some of our candidates. For instance, number one, politics is all about power relations, but to advance one's power, one must couch one's position in the language of morality. Now, you can immediately jump to somebody like, say, Bernie Sanders, who has been out there making the pitch that our economy is, in essence, an immoral economy because it leaves so many people behind. And that would feel right to you because Bernie Sanders is a self-avowed socialist. But what about Mike Huckabee? What about Mike Huckabee, who has actually based his entire campaign on taking positions not only from a point of view of morality, but from another Alinsky greatest hits, civil disobedience? Mike Huckabee has been out there beating the bushes, telling anybody who will listen that they should ignore the Supreme Court in their ruling on same-sex marriage, and that they should disobey and engage in whatever it takes to not stand up for this because, in the words of the governor, there is a supreme being that takes precedence over the Supreme Court. Then you have another quick one. Change is brought about through relentless agitation and troublemaking of a kind that radically disrupts society as it is. One word for that, I think you'll get the point, Trump. It seems that Saul Alinsky is not just for the left wing anymore.
Wow. And I'm sure you got some wonderful comments in your article about that.
I did. And,
we'll
actually,
read them in the next block.
Yeah.
Up next, it's Yay or Nay. This is the Daily Wrap. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. It's time for Yay or Nay. First up, disturbing news out on the Veterans Affairs Department. A new report finds that about a third of veterans waiting for medical care have already died. According to the Huffington Post, as of last April, over 800,000 veterans were waiting for medical care and treatments. Well over 200,000 of those veterans had already passed away. The VA blames poor bookkeeping. Is it as fair as that, or is there more to the story? Bill Tucker.
I don't buy this. There's got to be more to the story, and I will admit it's a personal issue because my father depends on the Veterans Administration for his medical care. But the man who runs it is a West Point graduate, a former veteran, and he ran a major company. I can't believe that he would say, oh, it's bookkeeping.
Wow. Rick.
There is much more to the story, and it happens to be a story that I am currently working on. This is, in my estimation of everything we talk about, this is our country's biggest disaster. If we can't keep our contract with the people we send to fight and die in foreign wars, then we have a problem that exceeds all of our other problems.
Brad, not to be cliche, it's not a red or blue issue, but clearly a matter of right and wrong, and this is a whole bowl of wrong.
This is a whole ball of wrong. Their war isn't over. Our obligation to the men and women who serve this country and are going to harm's way on our behalf, that's to the end of their lives.
And we'll leave it there. A Canadian-based technology company is working on a pot breathalyzer. Yes, designed to work just like an alcohol breathalyzer. The device will be able to detect the presence of THC in someone's system. That's not a band from the 90s. That's actually the chemical in marijuana. No word yet on the release date, but with the legal and medical marijuana use growing in this country, legalized in a couple of states, is a pot breathalyzer a good idea, yay or nay?
It's useless until the states that have legalized marijuana set some kind of measurement for deciding when you can and can't drive.
Yeah.
I'm unaware of any such law, so I don't get the point.
You think it'd be like drinks, like, or if you have more than 2 hits, then you shouldn't be on the road type of thing?
That's the problem. It's a great idea, but it really sounds like a setup for a con. I've got some elixir here that'll make your hair grow, and you'll be a lot more virile, and you'll lose 35 pounds in 3 days, kind of deal. So.
Could be a good cocktail conversation. Like, I just got this pot breathalyzer on Amazon. It's awesome.
So it's a party game.
Yeah.
You notice the ad suggests it's also for use in the workplace. What workplace?
Yeah.
Like, where is that being used
Actually,
and by whom?
It's going to be used
and what's
by,
going to legalize that?
It's going to be used by fathers of teenage kids who'll be waiting at the door with it when they come home.
That workplace, yeah, I mean the home.
Yeah.
I got it.
Next, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker announced yesterday that he's officially running for president. Following that announcement, some internet detectives found that his campaign logo looked very familiar to another logo. Take a look. The logo on top is for America's Best Contacts and Eyeglasses. The logo on the bottom is Mr. Walker's. Did Governor Walker steal his campaign logo from America's Best? The E's are very similar, Mr. Hirschfield.
I know. No reason to believe that he did, and maybe he wants to be America's best.
Okay. Bill, you use America's Best Contacts and Eyeglasses. Are you offended?
No, not at all. I don't even know how to respond to that, Joe. No.
Okay.
I do. For a man who is yet to have an original idea in his now almost 8-year governor's career, can we be at all surprised?
Oh boy, it's supposed to be a nice, fun, and you had to.
It was fun for me.
Sure.
And that's what counts.
You want a last word on this one?
Original idea? The man took over Wisconsin, had so many original ideas that he offended people who tried to get him thrown out of office, and he got reinstated into office.
Okay, we got to move on.
We're so lucky we got to go.
Yeah.
There's so
we
much
got to move
say
on.
about that.
Finally tonight, with every election cycle, there are campaigns and campaign songs. And sometimes artistes are not exactly happy when a politician selects one of their songs without asking. We all heard about Neil Young and how he felt about Donald Trump using Rockin' in a Free World just last month to announce his run for president. But this has been been a problem for some time now. According to Rolling Stone, the first time this happened was back in 1984 when Ronald Reagan used the Bruce Springsteen song Born in the USA without permission during the campaign. Bruce was not very happy about that. Instances like this have happened ever since, but 2008 seemed to have the most controversies, with artists and politicians butting heads over songs 11 times. Senator John McCain specifically had an issue 5 or 6 times during his campaign alone. And we got to go. I got to answer my own question. Will politicians ever learn to ask in these situations? Yes, no, I don't know. Steve Malzberg is next. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.